When the villagers found her, she was covered in dirt, her dress torn, but her eyes, still shining. No one could believe who put her there, or why. This is the story of Amora, the girl jealousy tried to bury alive. Amora lived in a small village called Umudim. Her parents were farmers who worked hard from sunrise to sunset. Their house was made of red clay, with a roof of dry palm leaves that rustled whenever the wind blew. Amora was their only child. She had smooth brown skin and bright eyes that made people look twice when she smiled. She loved fetching water at the river, where the cool breeze brushed her face and her reflection sparkled like morning light on water. When she sang, the birds would pause to listen, and her laughter made even strangers smile. But beauty can be both a blessing and a burden. Soon, the people in the village began to talk about her. Some said her beauty was a gift from the gods, while others whispered that her mother must have used magic soap from a hidden shrine. Amora didn't understand why her looks made others angry. She only wanted peace. Every morning, she would go to the river, fill her clay pot, and hurry home before anyone could say something cruel. Still, the whispers followed her like shadows, growing louder with each passing day. There were 3 girls in the village who were always seen together: Ada, Ifema, and Chika. They were known for their beauty too, but none could match Amora's glow. At first, they only watched her from a distance, but soon jealousy began to eat at their hearts like slow fire. Whenever Amora passed, they would whisper and laugh, pretending to fix their hair or fetch firewood. "Look at her walking like a queen," Ada would say. "Maybe she dreams of marrying the prince," Ifema would add, and Chika would giggle until tears filled her eyes. Amora tried to ignore them, but their laughter stung. She went home each day pretending not to care. When her mother saw her sadness, she would pull her close and say softly, "My child, even sweet honey attracts flies. Don't stop shining because of jealous hearts." Amora nodded, but at night she cried into her mat, asking the stars why her beauty had become a reason for pain. The market square was always full of life. Women sold fruits, yam, and palm oil, their voices rising like music in the morning air. Amora went there with her mother to sell cassava. But whenever she walked past, people stopped talking and stared. Some smiled politely, others muttered things she couldn't hear. One day, she heard an old woman say, "That one is too pretty. Such beauty brings trouble." Amora looked down, clutching her basket tightly. Later that day, Ada and her friends came to the same market. They saw the way people looked at Amora and their jealousy grew stronger. "The prince will choose her if he sees her," Ada hissed. "We can't let that happen." The girls began spreading stories that Amora had a spirit in her body, that her eyes could charm men and bring bad luck to their wives. The lies spread faster than wildfire. By the time Amora returned home, even the children had started calling her River Girl. Her mother's face turned pale when she heard. "Keep your head high," she said, "truth will fight for you." But Amora wasn't sure truth was strong enough anymore. Days turned into weeks, and Amora began to stay home more often. She no longer went to the market with her mother or joined other girls at the stream. The laughter that once filled her home grew quiet. She spent most mornings helping her father weed the farm and most evenings sitting outside, watching the sky turn orange. Sometimes she heard Ada, Ifema, and Chika passing by, their voices bright with fake joy. They laughed loudly, talking about dresses and songs, pretending not to see her. It hurt more than any words. Her mother tried to cheer her up by telling stories at night. "The moon shines brighter after dark clouds pass," she would say. Amora smiled weakly, but her heart still felt heavy. One morning, the town crier beat his gong in the village square. "Attention! Attention!" he shouted. "By order of the king, there will be a royal dance next full moon. The prince will choose a wife from among the maidens of Umudim." The entire village buzzed with excitement. Mothers started sewing new wrappers. Girls began practicing dance steps near the stream. Even little children danced barefoot in the dust. Amora's heart sank when she heard the news. She knew Ada and her friends would shine that day, while she would be mocked. "I don't want to go," she told her mother. But her mother smiled gently and said, "My daughter, destiny hides in places we fear to enter. You will go." She gave Amora a fine wrapper she had saved for years and a small white bead necklace. "Wear this, my child. You are more than what people say." Amora touched the necklace and nodded. Maybe, just maybe, the gods would remember her. When Ada, Ifema, and Chika heard the news about the dance, they gathered near the river to talk. "If Amora comes, no one will look at us," Ada said, kicking a stone. "The prince will choose her at once," Chika agreed, folding her arms. "Then we will make sure she doesn't come," Ifema whispered. They looked at one another and smiled, the kind of smile that hides poison. That evening, while Amora was washing dishes outside, the three girls came to her house carrying roasted corn and fruit. "Amora," they called cheerfully, "we have missed you. We were wrong before. Can we be friends again?" Amora was surprised but happy. "Of course," she said softly. After that day, Ada, Ifema, and Chika began to visit Amora often. They brought groundnuts, fruits, and stories. They laughed together like old friends, plaited each other's hair, and even helped her carry water from the stream. Amora's heart grew lighter again. She had missed laughter, and now she finally had people to share it with. Her mother still watched quietly, her face showing both joy and fear. She wanted her daughter to be happy, but she could feel something wasn't right. One evening, Amora showed the girls the wrapper she planned to wear to the dance. It was bright yellow with blue lines that shimmered in the sunlight. "It's beautiful," Chika said quickly. "You'll look like a goddess," Ada added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. As they left, they whispered to each other. "We'll carry out the plan the day before the dance," Ada said. "She trusts us now," Chika replied. The next morning, the three girls went into the forest carrying hoes and sticks. They said they were looking for firewood, but that was a lie. They stopped in a quiet place where the trees were tall and the ground was soft. There, they began to dig. The sun rose high above their heads, and sweat rolled down their faces, but they didn't stop. They dug until the hole was deep enough for a person to fall in. "Tomorrow, we will bring her here," Ada said, breathing hard. "Once she falls, she will never reach the dance." That night, Amora's mother had a strange dream. She saw her daughter walking through the forest while snakes crawled around her feet. She woke up frightened and called out, "Amora." Her daughter came running. "What is it, Mama?" "Promise me," her mother said, gripping her hand, "don't follow those girls anywhere tomorrow." Amora smiled softly and said, "I promise." But deep down, she wasn't sure if she could refuse her new friends. The morning of the royal dance was bright and full of music. The village was alive with drums and laughter. Amora's mother helped her dress in the yellow wrapper and tied the bead necklace around her neck. "You look like a princess," she said proudly, her eyes shining with tears. Amora hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Mama. I'll make you proud." Her mother held her close for a moment longer. "Remember what I said," she whispered. "Go straight to the palace. Don't follow anyone." Soon, Ada, Ifema, and Chika arrived, wearing colorful clothes and pretending to be excited. "Amora, let's go together," Ada said. "We know a short path through the forest. It will be faster." Amora hesitated. Her mother's words echoed in her heart. "Maybe we should take the main road," she said quietly. But the girls laughed. "Oh, don't be scared," Chika teased. "We're all friends now." Amora smiled weakly and followed them. The drums in the distance grew softer as they entered the forest, and the air around them became still and heavy. The forest path was narrow, covered with dry leaves that cracked softly under their feet. The girls laughed as they walked, pretending to enjoy the journey. Ada talked about how she would dance for the prince, while Chika hummed a song. Amora smiled politely, but her heart beat fast. "Are you sure this is the right way?" she asked. Ada nodded quickly. "Yes, it's a shortcut," she said. "Just a few more steps." Then Ada pointed ahead. "Look, Amora, this way is smoother," she said. Amora stepped forward, trusting her. Suddenly the ground beneath her gave way. She screamed as she fell into the deep hole they had dug. Dust filled her eyes and mouth as she hit the bottom hard. Pain shot through her leg. "Help me," she cried. "Please." But the girls only looked down at her, their faces cold. Stay there and dance for the ants, Ada said. Now we'll see who the prince chooses. The three of them turned and walked away, their laughter fading into the trees. Amora cried until her voice grew weak, alone in the dark pit. As the day passed, no one came to the forest. Amora tried to climb, but the walls were too steep. Her hands bled as she clawed at the dirt. She called for help until her throat burned, but the only answer was the sound of crickets. When night fell, the air grew cold. She curled up in a corner, shivering. Tears rolled down her face as she whispered, "Mama, I'm sorry." The moonlight couldn't reach her, and she felt like the world had forgotten her. Back at the palace, the drums echoed through the air as the maidens danced. The prince watched them carefully, but his eyes seemed sad. None of them feel right, he told the king. Something is missing. Meanwhile, Amora's mother was in the crowd, searching for her daughter. "Have you seen Amora?" she asked the girls. They shook their heads, pretending not to know. The mother's heart grew heavy. She felt something was terribly wrong. The next morning, a hunter named Ease left his hut early. He carried his bow and a small bag of food. As he walked deeper into the trees, he heard a faint sound, a weak voice calling, "Help me, please, help me." He stopped and listened. The voice came again. "Is anyone there?" Ease followed the sound until he reached the old pit. He looked down and saw a girl, covered in dirt and shaking. "Oh, great heavens," he gasped. "Hold on, child." Ease quickly tied a rope to a tree and lowered it into the hole. "Grab it," he shouted. Amora held on tightly as he pulled her up. When she reached the top, she collapsed, too weak to stand. Ease gave her water and food from his bag. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes full of tears. "Please, take me home." But Ease looked at her carefully and said, "No, my child. You must go to the palace. The king must see what has happened." Amora nodded slowly, and together they began the long walk back to the village. The sun was high when Ease and Amora reached the palace gate. Guards rushed forward, surprised to see the dirty and tired girl leaning on the hunter's arm. "Who are you?" one asked. "This girl needs help," Ease said. She was trapped in a pit in the forest. The guards looked at each other, then quickly sent word to the king. Soon, the palace courtyard filled with people, curious eyes staring, whispers rising like wind. When the king and the prince stepped out, the crowd went silent. The prince's eyes widened as he saw Amora. Even covered in dust, she glowed with quiet grace. "Bring her inside," he said quickly. The palace maids washed her face and gave her food. When the king asked what had happened, Amora told them everything, from the friendship to the trap. "Find those girls," he commanded. The guards bowed and ran out. Amora's mother, who had been waiting outside, rushed in and held her daughter tight, crying with joy. "I thought I had lost you," she whispered. Amora smiled weakly. "The gods saved me, Mama." By evening, the guards returned with Ada, Ifema, and Chika. They stood before the king, their heads down, trembling. "Did you dig that pit?" the king asked, his voice deep and cold. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Ada burst into tears. "Yes, my king," she said. "We were jealous. We only wanted to stop her from coming to the dance." Ifema and Chika began crying too. The king shook his head slowly. "You let envy lead you into wickedness. Do you know what could have happened to her?" None of them could answer. The king looked at the girls again. "You will be punished, but not with death," he declared. "You will serve in the palace for 1 year, working for those you tried to harm. Let this be your lesson." The crowd murmured in agreement. Ada and her friends were led away in tears. Amora watched them go, her heart heavy. "I forgive them," she said quietly. The king nodded. "Your heart is pure, child. That is why the gods protect you." The next day, the king called for another gathering in the courtyard. The prince stood beside him, tall and calm. "Yesterday, evil tried to hide goodness," the king said. "But the truth has come out. Now, let us finish what we began." The drums began to play softly. One by one, the maidens came forward again, bowing to the prince. When it was Amora's turn, the prince smiled. "You are brave, kind, and forgiving," he said. These are the true marks of a queen. He took her hand and placed a small gold bangle around her wrist. The people cheered loudly. Amora's mother cried tears of joy as she watched. From today, the king announced, Amora shall be known as the Jewel of Umudim, chosen by the gods and loved by her people. The crowd shouted her name again and again, Amora, 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 as the drums grew louder and the air filled with song. The days that followed were filled with celebration. The whole village of Umudim danced for 3 nights, singing songs about Amora, the girl who was saved from jealousy. The prince visited her home often, helping her parents with farm work and bringing them gifts from the palace. You raised a rare daughter, he told her mother one day. Her heart shines brighter than gold. Amora's parents smiled with pride. The pain they once felt slowly faded, replaced with joy and peace. Meanwhile, Ada, Ifema, and Chika worked in the palace kitchens. They swept floors, washed pots, and served food. At first, they were angry and ashamed, but as days passed, they began to change. They saw how kindly Amora treated even those who had hurt her. One afternoon, when she came to bring food to the servants, Ada whispered, "Thank you for forgiving us." Amora smiled softly. "We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them." Ada bowed her head. "We will never forget," she said. One bright morning, the king called for a grand feast in honor of Amora. Drums echoed across the hills, and people from nearby villages came with gifts. Goats, yams, and baskets of fruits filled the courtyard. The king stood and raised his hand for silence. "Today," he said, "we celebrate the return of goodness and forgiveness. Let this day remind us that beauty without kindness means nothing." The people cheered loudly. Then the prince stood beside Amora and spoke. "My heart chose her not for her face, but for her spirit," he said proudly. He turned to her and smiled. "Amora, will you walk beside me as my queen?" The crowd gasped. Her mother covered her mouth in surprise. Amora's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, my prince," she said softly. The people clapped and sang. Even the sky seemed to glow brighter as the drums beat faster. The wedding day came quickly. The palace was decorated with flowers and bright cloths. The women braided Amora's hair and placed a shining crown made of gold leaves on her head. The queen embraced her warmly. The prince stood waiting in his royal robe, his eyes full of love. The ceremony began with songs and blessings from the elders. The crowd watched as Amora and the prince walked hand in hand around the sacred fire. "May the gods protect your union," the chief priest said. When the ceremony ended, fireworks lit the sky. People danced deep into the night. Amora's parents sat proudly near the front, watching their daughter shine. The hunter smiled quietly to himself. "It seems the forest gave us back a queen," he whispered. Amora looked around and saw Ada, Ifema, and Chika standing in the crowd, clapping shyly. She smiled at them, and they smiled back, their hearts lighter than before. Weeks passed, and Amora learned the ways of the palace. She listened to people's problems, helped the poor, and visited schools to encourage young girls to be kind and brave. "Let no one's words break you," she told them. "True beauty comes from your heart." The people loved her dearly. The king and queen often said, "Our son chose well." The palace, once filled with pride and competition, now felt warm and peaceful. One afternoon, Amora went back to the stream where everything had started. The water sparkled under the sun, and she remembered her lonely days. She knelt down and whispered, "Thank you, gods, for turning my pain into strength." Then she threw a small flower into the water. "Let it carry peace," she said softly. As the flower floated away, a gentle wind brushed her face, and she smiled. Years later, Amora became queen beside her husband, the prince. Together they ruled with fairness and love. The village of Umudim grew strong, full of laughter and song. No one dared to mock or envy others again, for they had learned from the story of the girl who fell and rose again. Children grew up hearing her tale by moonlight, sitting under the big tree while the elders spoke. "Remember Amora," they would say. "The girl who forgave and became a queen." Every year, on the day of the river dance, the people gathered at the stream to give thanks. Amora and the prince always joined them, dancing with joy among their people. When the drums beat and the voices rose, her mother would smile proudly and say, "My daughter's light will never fade." And so it was, the girl once trapped in darkness became the shining heart of her village, loved forever by all. If you enjoyed the story, hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and leave a comment.